Hello, my name is Lisa Scullion and I'm Professor of Social Policy at the University of Salford. On behalf of the Welfare at a Social Distance team, I'm pleased to welcome you to the launch of our report. In terms of the agenda for our event, we will begin with a presentation of the main findings from our research by Dr. Kate Summers and Dr. David Robertshaw on behalf of the Welfare at a Social Distance team. Straight after that, we're going to move very quickly to a panel response from our three guests. Firstly, we'll have Ellen Clifford, who is an expert by experience and Welfare at a Social Distance Project Advisory Board member. Katie Schmucker, who is Deputy Director and Policy and Partnerships Manager at Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And Neil Cooling, CBE, who's the Director General of Universal Credit. After that, we will open up to a panel discussion and Q&A session. So please do use the Q&A function to post any questions that you might have for the research team or for our guests. For those who use Twitter, the Twitter handle for the project is @DistantWelfare, and we have a hashtag for the report, which is #WASD report. Now, before I hand over to Kate and David to talk about our findings, I just wanted to very quickly introduce our project for those who aren't familiar with what we've been doing. So the Welfare at a Social Distance project is a major national study funded by the ESRC as part of the Covid-19 rapid response. It's a collaboration of 5 universities led by the University of Salford, and we started this project in May last year. And since then, we have worked really quickly to provide data for policymakers and practitioners to support the national response. And we've done that through 3 significant work packages. The first work package is a survey of claimants, and we've got over 6,000 responses, focusing on both existing and new claimants. We'll be doing 3 waves of the survey, and the report that we present in this event focuses on the first wave of the survey. We've also got a substantive work package, which is a qualitative longitudinal work package, where we have 74 benefit claimants whose experiences we're tracking over the course of the pandemic. The report that we're presenting focuses on the first wave of interviews with 74 claimants, and again, that's new and existing claimants, with the follow-up interviews to come in the spring. The third significant work package focuses on interviews with support organisations, so those organisations that are involved in supporting claimants during the pandemic, and those have been carried out in 4 geographical case study areas. So since we started the project, we've actually published 3 rapid reports. So this isn't our first report, but this is our first major report, and that brings together the survey of claimants and the interviews with claimants to reflect on claimants' experiences during the first wave of COVID-19. But I'm going to hand over to Kate to tell you a bit more about the project and about the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Before I hand over to my colleague David, I'm just going to run you through the outline for today and what we're going to talk through in terms of the report and our findings. So today we don't have time to cover everything. We're going to look at 3 key areas that we look at in the report. The first of these is looking at the wait for the first payment. The second is looking at aspects of the claiming process. And the third is looking at financial struggles. I'll then talk through other key areas that are covered in the report, so that those that are interested know what we have in more depth and themselves can go and look at the report if they want to find that more detail there. I'll finish the presentation by highlighting some key policy implications and recommendations. So with that just quickly covered, let me hand over to my colleague David, who's going to talk through these key areas in detail.
So I'm now going to briefly talk you through some of the more interesting things that came out of our research. Firstly, in relation to how people were finding their way around the system. Now, one of many things that we were interested in was whether there was a gap between a person's change in circumstances and the actual application for a benefit. Our survey found that it was common for new claimants to delay making an application, and about 36% of them did this for between a week and a month, and a further 14% delayed making a claim for over a month. Now, what we're looking at here on this chart is the applications that were delayed for over a month, and it's a comparison of new and existing claimants of key working age benefits. We can see that the proportion of people delaying a claim for that long has dropped, and we speculate that this could reflect increasing awareness of the system or the fact that there are more limited opportunities for work. But it's still very clear that this is an issue for hundreds of thousands of people, and it could end up having very serious financial implications for them. Now, in our survey and our interviews, we asked people why it was that they delayed their applications, and there were a mixture of reasons behind this. The main one was uncertainty about eligibility. Our survey found that 41% of those who delayed their claim for over a month did so because they were unsure about whether they were entitled in the first place. And we also heard these kind of experiences in the interviews as well. So here we see Patricia explaining that she and her husband delayed their claim because they were unsure about their eligibility, and they were unsure because this was the first time they'd ever come into contact with the system. We also heard about delays that were linked to experiences of a sense of stigma, hopes of being furloughed, and it was also common to hear about people going through an intensive period of job search for a couple of weeks before eventually then biting the bullet and making a claim. And it was also quite common for us to hear people expressing regret about not having applied earlier. And this was sometimes linked to misunderstandings about whether or not claims could be backdated, or just a lack of awareness about the 5-week wait at the start of a universal credit claim. There are also some interesting findings about how people have been managing that 5-week wait. Now, while the overwhelming majority of interviewees had been informed of the advanced facility, just under 2/3 chose not to apply. And looking at this chart, the second and third pair of columns indicate that roughly half of the people who didn't apply had sufficient earnings or savings to manage that 5-week wait. But interestingly, the first pair of columns shows that 28% of those who chose not to apply were worried about getting into debt with DWP. And this raises then a question about how they managed to survive during that period. And of those who were reluctant to get into debt with DWP, many chose instead to borrow either formally from banks or on a credit card or from friends of family. And to a lesser extent, they also then relied upon emergency assistance from food banks or other forms of charity. And I think